Hey folks, just a little bit of a new video on my next project, which will be this folding feather yard. What we're looking at here is the 3D model in SketchUp of what the yard assembled or erected will look like. So let's see here, if I move it around, you can kind of get an idea of how big it's going to be. Oops, kind of what the height. I don't know how high that little guy is. And then over here, this is what it will look like when it's all folded up and packed for storage. This is the leg panel. One will mount to each side, and one of them will have casters in this area so that when you can lay it back down and roll it, get it out to your vehicle. So that's what I'm going to be building. We got till November 11th to get it done. That ought to put a little pressure on me. Let me load the animation of how it folds up. So here's how it's erected. There's it folded. So ideally, once it's done being erected, you'd lay it over on its side, would remove the legs, fold in the outer wings, fold up the main wings. Then you attach your panels on the top, roll it over. That keeps everything from flopping around, and put the one with the casters on it, or vice versa, either way. So now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at the track plan. So this is the track plan all drawn up in XCAD, TrackCAD. The yellow cars here on the bottom, and I'll zoom in here in a minute, are 89-foot auto racks. The orange are 60 footers, reds are 50 footers, and the brown are 40 footers. The green right here is cabooses, and this is an engine service area. So you kind of get an idea of the flow. Let me zoom in and I'll give you a little bit more of a close-up. To the halfway point right here, that's 11 89-foot auto racks. So you can get a pretty good size N-scale train through there. Sorry, I reversed that. The bottom track would be staging. The run-through track would be the next track up, which would be the main or a staging track if there's not a lot of running. The next track from the bottom would be the secondary arrival departure, and the next track next to the yard proper, which would be the primary arrival departure track. Now, I did design this using the 10 Commandments of Craig Biscayar about your yard lead needs to be long enough to pull a full length of whatever your sorting tracks are. And you can do that two ways. So right here you've got the main line coming in to our yard right here, and you've got two different routes here. So one, you can be switching and you have enough room off of this in-out position to do all your sorting and operate the yard fully, and you're not tying up anything. Trains can come and go and you can still do it. But when you get ready to either pull or put to either of these two departure arrival tracks, you have enough room to take a full cut of cars, a full length of your sorting tracks, and push it or pull it off the train onto these tracks. There is a little bit of a seesaw to get locomotives into this engine service area, but I have given a couple of ways into and out of the yard, so things can be happening when the yard engine is pulling apart a train or putting together a train on the AD tracks, and it also aids you, depending on which end your power is on, getting a train over to the servicing tracks. Now I put the caboose track here because I envision that this area at the top will be yard offices and that sort of thing, uh, whether it's just parking lot or whatever. I mean, it's a fairly good sized yard for a small yard. Now, some folks might think this is not enough staging area, not enough run-through track. Um, it's plenty. Our group is primarily interested in short line operations, so this is a fairly sizable yard for a small short line type thing. And I think if we run our normal 10, 12 car trains, this is plenty of yard because you've got room for about 4 to 6 trains in staging, um, depending on how many guys are running. There's a little bit of room that guys can park things to go have lunch or take a bathroom break or just sit down and rest without clogging the whole thing up. So that's a good thing. We'll flip back to the SketchUp view and I'll show you how this works with hinges, kind of. There's not really room for scenery height-wise. This is designed as a yard, so whatever structures are going to be put here are going to have to be removable so that you can fold the thing up. So let's go back to the SketchUp view. If we look at the folded up version of this, and let's move this out of the way, so get rid of the leg panel. There is I think I've only drawn this with a 1-inch gap, but my idea is that the hinge will span this gap at the top, and the hinge point will be 1 inch above this roadway surface. Okay, so that'll be 2 inches of gap between here and there. So you can have some low-lying shrubs, little hills, even a loading dock or that kind of thing as scenery without having your scenery get messed up. And where these tapered wings come together on the other side here, so on this side there will be little legs, little bump stops that come up in here to lock the things together, and there may be keep them from rattling around and collapsing on each other. And I may dowel pin those so that they hold their alignment so that it doesn't put too much stress on the hinges for shipping purposes. So that's part of the reason why the leg panels hook onto the side here, so that there'll be bolts and things to hold those on there and keep stuff from shifting around during transit. Now the other thing that I'm not showing on here is that there will be diagonal braces that will be secured inside the legs here, and when you erect this, these go into leg pockets so they don't pivot, they come loose, but there will be a brace that comes up and attaches to this edge. Idea behind that is if we have a super stable area on the layout, then the other modules don't have to have really super sturdy legs. I mean, they have to hold elevation, they shouldn't fall off and that kind of thing, but they don't need to be ultra rigid. We've gotten pretty good success with our tubular legs and using spring clamps and some diagonal braces on them to stiffen the thing up, but having one really rigid section actually gives a lot of rigidity to the rest of the layout. So the construction materials that I bought are it's going to be 3/4 inch plywood for all the end plates all the way through this thing, 3/4 inch plywood for all the side pieces, and a 1/2 inch plywood for the decks. The end plates will come all the way to the top surface, right, at each end, and the decks will sit between the two, give you a little overlap. I think we'll end up with a stronger joint that way. Now, where the hinges sit, which is at this join right here, this will be pocketed with a router to allow the hinges to sit so that the faces sit flush. And again, I may dowel the lower edges to help align it when it's in its erected configuration. As far as securing, like this center section, oh, Tony, you only got 2 sets of legs. How's this center section going to support itself? Well, either we'll put bolts through these pieces, or we'll just use the C-clamp, the vice grip clamps at each of the joints. It seems to work pretty well for our modules right now, and that will keep this from keep it supported. If that is not sufficient, I can add a leg pocket and build a second panel and support this center section. But my idea is that I want to keep the number of loose parts down. I want to keep it as compact as possible so that, I mean, it's going to take 2 guys to move it because it's going to be pretty heavy as it is, but I want to keep it as light as I can, as sturdy as I can, and keep the number of loose parts that can get lost or shake loose during transit to a minimum. The main line, most of the track will be just laid flat on the decking surface, except for the main, which is that second track from the bottom on the track plan. That will be up on cork roadbed to designate it as a main line. And the reason to have the hinges above the deck material is so that as you fold the wings and the main section up, the track will move away from each other, so there won't be any binding at the track interface. So that's the whole idea. Give me some comments, suggestions if you don't like the track plan, or whatever else I might have forgotten. There's quite a few things that I haven't worked out yet, such as control options for the yard. I think it'll all be manual with either bullfrogs or blue points. The yard section, this section through here, will probably only be controlled from the top, whereas these turnouts at either end that lead through to the mains will have controls for both sides. Not really sure about the crossover sections. I may, it's pretty simple to allow you to switch those from both sides. That's something else I'll have to consider, but we'll see. We'll get there. And I may actually, the guys may want to add a second locomotive storage track here for like a fueling facility. All of that can be talked about. All the turnouts are number 7s except for the yard sorting tracks themselves. Those will be number 6s. And the only other thing that I haven't really come to grips with is electrical wiring underneath. In the underside here, where this comes together, there will need to be a pass-through. If we look at it in its folded configuration, at this joint, that's not a big problem because you just have wires and we'll just leave enough gap enough slack to be able to fold this up 90 degrees, and those are pretty well protected. It's probably not going to catch in anything. You just have to make sure that somebody holds it as you lower it into position so they don't get pinched in there. If that becomes problematic, we'll cut it, put Anderson connectors, and that'll be a disconnect. Up on the top, where this section is, that wiring will need to have disconnects, and because otherwise you're going to have a big loop of stuff, and that could get hung up on stuff. So probably we'll end up with disconnects for everything. That's my plan. Thanks for watching.